Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to a new video. So, I know I released copy variants a couple days ago, but there's already an update. So we have copy variants 1.2. And before I actually get to the video, thank you guys so much for being so supportive. We already had almost 140 people downloading the tool, and some of you have actually been paying, which is very crazy, and thank you guys. This is obviously a free tool, so there are no expectations, but again, I really do appreciate this. And yeah, let's move on to the actual video. So we have a version 1.2. We have a new UI. You can actually use the Redshift proxies much easier now, which we're going to talk about today. And just the overall look is also a little different, which I think it's actually pretty cool. And before I forget, a couple people suggested me putting a couple of lines in here as disclaimers. So first of all, this tool right now, this tool is only available for Houdini Indie because I don't have an FX license. If anyone from SideFX is watching this, please help me out here. I could use some help and converting this into an HDA rather than HDA LC, which is currently the version the version that we're working with. Also, you need to install SideFX Labs tools because there are a couple of features in here. I'm actually trying to remove them and replace them with simpler stuff. For example, there's like the random selection. I'm using the SideFX Labs tool random selection right now, but I'm gonna replace it with just it's a couple of lines of vex. Obviously it's not gonna do everything that the node does, but we don't need all of it. We just need the probability, and obviously removing the points. And also some features, and more specifically one feature is specific to Redshift. And if you're not a Redshift user, you might get some errors. We're going to talk about the error right now. But if you go to the download folder, you can see there are folders now in here. So latest version is 1.2. Just download this one. You obviously have previous builds. 1.0 was actually never public because 1.1 was definitely better. But also, I'm going to just say this now. If you're on 1.1, just switch to 1.2. It's definitely better. And also, we're going to have the new example scene. After we record this tutorial, I'm just gonna upload it in here. So we're gonna have a sample scene for 1.2. Okay, cool. So let's do this real quick. What I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna switch to my Houdini folder. I'm gonna open my houdini.env file. I'm gonna talk about the Redshift error right now. So I'm gonna just change this path so that I don't have Redshift. I'm gonna launch Houdini and it should be pretty fast. Obviously I get this error which is saying can't find the Redshift shelf. When I bring Houdini to the second monitor, let me actually close this one. My Redshift shelf is empty. Perfect. So when I place a geometry and find copy variance node, when I place it I get this error which is saying there was an error while matching the new node to its definition. When you show the details, it's telling us we are missing this node, Redshift instance file sub, which is a Redshift node. This is the only Redshift node that's being used in here. If you look it up, oh, actually I can't look it up obviously because I don't have Redshift right now. As you can see, when I place the node, it's unlocked. When I jump inside, this is the place that the node is supposed to be, and Houdini is replacing it with a merge node right now. So everything else is working. If you put down like a box in here and a grid, very simple stuff. Obviously the tool is working. You can just add a sphere, I don't know, just do the normal stuff. The tool is doing what it's supposed to do, but if you place another copy variance, you still get the error. So the way you can fix this is by either jumping inside and just removing this particular node in here and just saving this. Oh, you don't even need to remove it, just save this current definition and then you're good to go. But you have to repeat this for every release. Or what I can do is essentially two things. I can either release, let me talk about what's actually causing this. It's in the proxy section. We're going to talk about the proxies in a minute, but it's this option, preview instance file. And it works for proxies. It's specifically Redshift proxies. If you have, we're going to talk about Redshift in a second. Just talk about the whole proxy workflow. But as I mentioned, this is just a external node as well. I mean, I don't have it in here again, but if you do have it, you can just wire it after the node. So I don't know, I might remove this option entirely so no one gets an error. I personally use this a lot, so it's personal for me. So let me know in the comments. If someone, if most people want me to keep this, I'll keep it. It really depends on if we have Redshift users in here more or just like normal Houdini users. It really depends on you guys. So yeah, just let me know. Okay, I'm gonna close Houdini now. I'm gonna jump back into my environment file. Isn't it opening? Okay. Remove the queue that I added in here to mess up the path. Save it up, and I'm gonna launch Houdini again. Okay, so we're in Houdini. Obviously, Redshift is now working for me. And if I place a GeoNode, jump inside and copy variant, I'm not getting any errors. And also I can show you the node I'm talking about. So Redshift instance file preview SOP. The UI is actually literally the same. I just copied this node and pasted it inside. So yeah, you can, if I end up removing this feature in the future, you could just wire one of these after working with proxies, and you could visualize what you're working with. Okay, let's talk about the actual changes. So we have 3 files in here. We're gonna just talk about all these examples. So I'm gonna jump inside. First thing we're gonna talk about is the new look of the tool. As you can see in the previous version, and let me place one of the previous versions. By the way, this is a really important thing. If you're working with multiple versions of this same HDA, and in general you might be doing this, go to your asset section, and there's this asset definition toolbar. By default it's set to hide, so you shouldn't be seeing that up here, but I like to set this to show when needed, which means whenever an asset has multiple definitions, you're gonna see an option in here. Even native Houdini tools have them. Like even on the scatter tool, for example, you have scatter and then scatter 2.0, which is what is being used by default, but you can access them. Okay, so I'm gonna switch this one to, for example, 1.0 or 1.1. As you can see, we used to have 4 different inputs. Internally, we needed to connect them. One of them was being used for the curves, and one of them was being used for this geomask. But in the new version, we actually don't have that. It makes it also very much easier to place the node, because you could just select both of them and hit CVAR, and yeah, there you go. Everything is connected. Otherwise, it would connect things to the second input, and then you'll get an error. It wouldn't work. This is much better now. We're going to talk about what exactly these 2 features that are not actually available now as inputs are doing, and how you can access them. We haven't talked about curves. We did talk about the object mask, but we haven't talked about curves. So yeah, that's what we're going to do first. So right now we have a basic scene. I'm just bringing in all these different shapes, 4 different shapes. It's kind of like the standard way I work with the tool these days. I just wire 4 different shapes in here, but just literally the most basic geometries, because I keep changing things around, so I want to be able to at least get some consistency. Okay, we're gonna work with the curve section. So first thing I do, I enable this curve section, and the only thing that happens is I get a new tab down here. When I go in here, there's an input curve section. So rather than connecting it to an input, now we have somewhere to drag and drop a curve. So I'm just going to place a line in here, and I'm just going to drag this line, paste it in here. As you can see, we get these. So I'm going to disable this geometry section, because I just want to see my curves now. And what's happening is this is a preset, so you are getting some sort of vegetation. I'm going to disable this animate noise, so everything is static, and I'm going to zoom in, and as you can see, they are actually moving around. So you could use this for vegetation, creating vegetation stuff, just filling the ground. If you need something just to kind of cover your scene, you can just use this one. I might actually end up removing this. I don't know. This was there literally when I started the tool. This was probably the first one I developed, and then I added the geometry because I was like, oh yeah, I want to work with this. In fact, this is the same setup that I use in my copy variants tutorial, the previous one that we had on the channel. Let me look it up real quick. You guys might not remember it. Something's wrong with my internet, I think. As always. Oh, I actually have the yeah, so this one. This is pretty much the same thing that I make in that tutorial. So yeah, it's kind of useful. I don't know. Let me know if you guys want me to keep it or just remove it. Personally, I haven't used it in, I don't know, months. And you could obviously like add more of them. Right now we have 10 variants, because if you go to your curve variant section, you can see we have 10. We can just bring it down. This is essentially a loop. You could scale it up, make them bigger. This is the curve, the main curve that we're putting in here. Obviously you have control on the segments. As I said, it's animating, so you could make it faster. Internally, it's just a anti-alias noise. You could bring up this frequency. You could add to the amplitude. I don't know, all the normal stuff. And obviously, you could edit, jump inside, and change the attribute swap that's inside. On the branches, you could affect their length. Maybe I should bring the point count down a little bit. Yeah. Curve section. What else? You could just bring them up and down. As you can see, it changes the source for when they start to grow. You could affect the segments, the minimum number of the branches that you get on the curve, and the maximum. You could manipulate the angle. Again, frequency, amplitude, the speed, everything is here. You could add geo to it. So if you need, you can just do a quick sweep. It's gonna slow it down quite a lot actually, but you know, the option is there. You could add compute the UVs. What else? You could affect the p scale obviously from this section, and you have control over the scale. Like I don't know. I think by default I should actually change these, because right now everything is set to 1, and this one should be set to 1, and then we should just compensate for them in here. So these are better numbers. I have to remember to change this. But anyways, and the final thing, let me actually uncheck this one. You could loop it, because right now it wasn't looped, but as you can see, like, as I scroll through the timeline, the first frame and the last frame are the same. By the way, I have 120 frames in here. You could colorize them, but if you do, you need to uncheck this randomize color per attribute, because you want to see that. And this is the visualizer is more important, so by default that one is more down the line. And you could also do some growth stuff, so you could control all of them, and there's also like a uniform growth. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And last thing, you could enable materials, so you just drag and drop your materials in here. Your main curve is going to be stem, and your branches are going to be branch material. Yeah, pretty simple, like nothing too complex. I'm just going to uncheck this one and uncheck the curves. For object mask, it's pretty much the same. I'm going to enable geometry, so we have something to see. I'm going to add a sphere, and just come here, enable object mask, go to object mask, and just drag this. There we go. And let me just find where I put this. It's pretty small, so I don't like polygon mesh. I like polygon. And let's just make it a little bit bigger, and there you go. As you can see, and you can obviously move it around, do the normal stuff. We already talked about this section, so I'm not gonna talk about it now. We have post-process, we have compensation, again, same as before. This is just an overview of the changes I made in the UI, which I think are actually pretty good, pretty useful, and you don't have like anything like in here anymore. Cool, so this is the UI change. Let's talk about the advanced patches. Now, this function is actually my favorite thing about the tool. This was the one that took some time to figure out. I think it's the coolest. And let's just jump in and see what we have in here. So just by looking at it, nothing is too complex in here. It's just the normal stuff. But let's look at our variants. And something is different in here. So we have a bunch of boxes, we have a bunch of tubes, and we have a bunch of toruses. And one thing that you could notice in here, if I zoom in on every variant, you can see that they are all boxes, but they are a little different. Same with the tubes. And same with this one. So what's different in here? I'm just scattering them in my scene, and what I want to do is actually going to the variant section, and let's just reset everything to where they are supposed to be by default. I'm going to keep the post process, but let's look at this variance. This is what we get by default when we wire the node. Now I want to create patches in this one. So obviously we set it to the patch and it's working, but there is one issue with it. Every object in the patch is the same. Well, that's obvious. But what I want to see in here, I have 3 different types of donuts, I like to call them. I don't like to call them torus. We have 3 donuts. Wouldn't it be more interesting if we had a patch, and inside this patch we had different types of donuts? It wasn't just one big donut and then there's another donut next to it. Or in here, we could have a bunch of different boxes rather than just this thing which you can't even barely understand what's happening in here. So this is what happens in the advanced cluster. But when I switch to advanced cluster, it's actually the same. It looks exactly like the attribute from pieces and when we put it on cycle. So what's going on in here? First of all, there are 3 options. There's also simple cluster. We're going to talk about both of them. But let's focus on advanced cluster first. It's telling me that it's looking for a piece attribute called type. So if I set up an attribute called type on my geometry, now I could actually create patches based on them. But what that means is that, as you can see, I've kind of categorized them together. There's a little bit of space in here. So these 4 are from the same type. These 3 objects are from the same type, and also these 3. Okay, let's do this. I'm gonna put down a wrangle, and what I'm gonna do, I have a preset in here for it. So set type attribute, and it's literally saying I at type is equal to channel I by the name of type. But I'm not gonna do it like this. Let's just set it up from scratch. It's nothing complex, but you know, why not? So we place a wrangle, and this type attribute is actually, as I mentioned, it's a integer. So I'm going to put down a merge packed node in here and wire it to the wrangle. Let's go in here. Now these are all from the first type. So I'm going to call them I at type is equal to 0. This is the first one. Now I'm also going to just remove all these connections. I don't need this merge pack down there anymore. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to wire them. Oh, wrong wiring. Wire them in here and call this one type 1 and repeat the same thing and type 2 in here. So obviously, if you have a preset for it, as I do, it's going to make it easier. And also, I have a channel integer. So if I set it to set type attribute, and I can just move it around, I don't need to type anything, hard code anything in there. But it's essentially the same thing. So just merge these 3 together. And we're on advanced cluster. I'm going to switch this to the normal one. So this is what we get from the normal patch. And when we switch to advanced cluster, this is what we get now. Okay, it might not look like it's working. And that's why, because you have all these different colors, so it makes it a little bit hard to understand. So in the visualizer section, we actually have an option for visualizing the type. And when I hit this, now you can actually see how cool it looks. So we have different types of the same object in here. And they all look different, and they are all being scattered in here based on, right now, based on a noise. We could come here and just change this patch, make it bigger, make it smaller, you could shuffle around. This is a really helpful thing. Now in this example, obviously we have a bunch of donuts and boxes, but if you have different plants, and imagine you're running it through a loop, that's exactly what we're gonna do in the actual, like the actual copyvariance scenario that we're gonna talk about in, I don't know, a couple of days probably. I decided to release this one before actually covering like an actual project, because it's simpler to cover things with boxes. But if you have a bunch of plants, it makes it so much easier to work with. And this type attribute is everywhere. So whenever you have an option for working with variants, you also have an option for working with the type, essentially. Even in here in the orientation section, if you go to this selected method, you could actually switch this to type. So you can say, I want things to happen only to type 0. And now type 0 is gonna look up. So everything is just following the normal, but type 0 is standing up. You could say type 1. Obviously you can switch it to variant and just type the variant numbers, but it's never easy to just remember which values you're working with. So type 0, just put it in here and you're good to go. Actually, this was variant type 0, yeah, or type 2. Now our donuts are standing up. Let's switch this to the normal, and obviously same thing happening with the randomizer. So you could just switch it to type and say, I don't want to randomize type 0. So everything is, I guess this one is actually not really that visible because they are pretty subdivided, but if you zoom in here, you can see that they are rotating, or maybe this is not a perfect example. So yeah, if I add like a platonic object in one of these, that would probably make it a little bit easier to see. So yeah, as you can see, like these are moving around, but type 0, which is our boxes, is just staying the same. Okay. Let me just remove this one as well. Don't need that. Kind of trying to reset everything, so yeah, there we go, perfect. Also, in the p-scale section, in the multiply p-scale, we've been working with the variant, but you could actually switch this to type, and now you could do the same thing for example, let's say type 0. So make type 0 bigger. Let me just bring the post-process relaxation down. So yeah, as you can see, like we are affecting this. We can switch to 1, and you can have as many as you want. So 0, 1, 2. You could just, yeah, go crazy. And also you have the option to affect both at the same time. And type always comes first. So in terms of the order that you're gonna see them, type is above it, and then you can see affecting your individual variant. So I'm gonna say I want the first, which is variant 0, to be very tiny, but I want one of them, which is 1, or let's just say variant number 2, to be very big. I don't like 2. Let's switch it to variant number 1. So this one is very big, but generally speaking, they are pretty small. You can do the same thing, maybe the other way around for the other type. So make this type generally bigger, but I don't like these. These are too big. And what I'm gonna do now is go to the visualizer and show me the location so that I can see which variant this one is. This is variant number 6. And I can come back to the p-scale section and bring variant number 6 down quite a lot. Perfect. So we are literally like working with this patch, and it's everywhere. Like whenever you're affecting something for the variants, there's always an option for working with the type, the general type as well. And generally speaking, it's quite helpful, even if you're not affecting the, even if you're not doing an advanced cluster and you're only working with the normal distribution. If you do have a type attribute, you could set it up for a bunch of them, just making it easier so that you don't have to type a bunch of stuff. And also obviously there's the simple cluster, which kind of maybe becomes useless right now, but this is literally, and it doesn't look that great right now. So let me just uncheck this one. So the simple cluster is just kind of clustering all of them in the same place. This one might need some editing because it's not exactly doing what I wanted it to do. let me take this randomly. It is actually doing it, but it doesn't look that great. So as you can see, like right now we have one section. It's essentially dividing your scene into into 3 sections. We have one section per patch. It makes sense if I jump inside and you can see the setup. So right now we have our points, and simple cluster is just literally creating a cluster based on their based on how many types you have. So right now we have 3 types, so we're gonna get 3 clusters, 3 patches, and that's it. We're not gonna see anything else. If you copy this one over, and I'm just gonna copy the whole thing. I'm not gonna add any different objects. It's fine, and just merge it in here. Well, I guess maybe I should. Let's just add one platonic object in section. In this section, there we go. So we just have like one. Essentially, it's divided into 4 sections. We have one platonic section, one section for these, one section for this one, and one section for. And that's it. And it seems like it's freaking out a little bit when it comes to the colorizing, so I might have to fix that one. I never really use this option because the advanced method is definitely better, and you could get like different types of patches. But if there's this one specific look that you're going after, this is the way to go. So and let me just this is all about like the clustering methods and the advanced patches. I think we're done in here. You could obviously just play with these I don't know, like the roughness, work with the strength of it, the patch size, like the scale. There are a bunch of stuff you could do in here. This is sort of like a distortion, so it's not really as like, you know, patchy as I like to call it. So you are kind of breaking it, but feel free to just play around with them. And last but not least, the proxy section, which is very interesting. So this is a little different. This example, I have a box in here, and I'm doing some simple animations on each one of these objects. So this one is just kind of going up and down like this. There's a simple expression in here, nothing too fancy. We have our sphere, which is doing kind of similar thing. It's not just affecting X and Z, it's just affecting the Y. And we have our torus, which is just going nuts. And what I've done is just I've created 3 simple materials, just only color, nothing complex. And I'm using a Redshift proxy output. So if you haven't worked with this, Redshift proxy output, you paste it in your scene. This is actually literally the Redshift ROP. In fact, if you go to edit parameter interface, and I think if you just hit accept, it changes it. I don't know. Let me try something. I think if you just drag a parameter, it kind of, yeah, it opens this whole section. So this is literally your Redshift ROP. It's just everything is just hidden. For some reason, when you add a parameter, it just messes this whole thing. But it doesn't really matter. It's fine. I'm gonna remove this, bring another one. So what you need to do for saving stuff is just going to the Redshift tab. First of all, we're working with a frame range, and also in the archive tab, sorry, not the Redshift tab, your archive tabs, you have your path. The path that I like to choose, I like to use is this. So $hip rs proxy, which is where I like to store my proxies in a file, in a project, and /$os, which is the name of the operator, and again another slash and $os.f4.rs. So that means if I go to the file now real quick, let me find it. Oh. Tutorials, YouTube, tutorials, and copy variants. Is it this one? Yeah. So if I go to the rs_proxy, I have 3 folders in here. For example, for box, I have box and .0001, which is $f4. You could do a bunch of stuff in here. If you have attributes and you're not using them in the material, you could, by default, it's checked in here. So discard the not used attributes. That makes the file size much smaller. You could obviously just not check this one if you need those attributes later. So for example, if you have velocity, something like that, you want to use it, but make sure you're cleaning everything, because proxies can get actually pretty huge. Like right now, they're very simple because it's just a basic shape, but yeah, be careful about that one. And this is all the setup that you need to do. Just save it, set your frame range. If you have something static, just set to current frame and just remove this. You could just save one file if nothing is moving around in your scene, and just use this one, and you don't need to cache for the whole scene. Cool. So we've done our preparation, and we're going to move on to copy variants. I'm just going to pause the video for a second, pause recording, and drink a little bit of water because my mouth is very dry. All right, so let's jump into the tool. Now, this is just a general empty copy variant, so everything is just default parameters, and this is what we're gonna get, which is actually kind of pretty cool. I like it. But we're gonna do some crazy stuff in here. So first of all, we're gonna enable proxy. Now, if I place down copy variants, another copy of this node, and switch to 1.1 or 1.0, I don't know, the one that had like all crazy interface, and visualize RS proxy. This is how it used to be. So you needed to come in here and type your proxies in this expression, and then this was the control interface that you got for time shifting it, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And you had your frame range and stuff, and you could visualize your instance file, which is not working right now because the path is not correct. We have to set it, and you had to literally do it inside here. Now, I've actually changed this part, and I'm very happy with the result, because right now, if I just side, we don't need it. If we enable this proxy option in here, this is your interface. No more crazy vex section. Obviously, it's still here. You can open it up, but rather than typing stuff in here, now you just type them in this line, and that's it. So what you need to do is literally naming the folders. So we set up a bunch of folders in here, right here. So we have box, sphere, and torus. And this is your help. It shows you what the current path is. So this part is empty, so you can see we have 2 slashes in here. The way I'm going to fix it is just write box. Let's actually, the order matters. So we have box, sphere, and torus. So box, comma, sphere, and torus. Now in the naming convention, you can actually see one of them I just didn't use a space, and for the other one I used in space. Internally, if you have spaces, the tool will remove them. So it doesn't matter that we have a space in here right now. But if in your naming you've used a space, it's actually gonna put these together. And if I visualize the third one, you can see that this is the path that's happening. So for your folder names, you shouldn't have spaces. But that's pretty obvious because in 3D we never really use spaces. We just use underline. But yeah, as you can see, like even if I put like remove H, like 2 spaces in here, my path, I forgot to put down E at the end. It's still sphere, even though we have a bunch of spaces. Every space will be removed automatically. So that's just something to be careful about. And yeah, that's it. Just use spaces, don't use spaces. If you have a crazy amount of names in here, you could go to the interface. Let me just select the tool. And this is something I'm still not sure about. I wanted to use a multi-parameter input, just like we did with the p-scale, which you could just like add a bunch of them. But this makes it so that you have to just add them one by one in a line, and then you could get like something super huge, and it's just not worth it. So in my opinion, this was much simpler. You just separate them with a comma. But if it's getting too much, if you have too many of them, you could switch the interface, come in here and just change it. Where is it? Variant names. So just switch this one to a multi-line string. I don't like the look when I do this because it's just, it looks exactly like Wix, and it's also not the prettiest interface. But you could just do this if you have too many of them, and enter doesn't count. So you could just put enter as much as you want, and it's fine. Like you could literally type your names like this. The comma is the thing that really matters. So we have box, we have sphere, and we have torus. It's exactly the same. Yeah, and that's it. So actually I got kind of worried here because it's putting them in the next line for some reason. If I push this, is it gonna fix it? Maybe it matters, I don't know. In the actual Vex, if you do it like that, it doesn't matter, but maybe in here that's actually important. I don't know, I have to look into this one. Someone remind me to do this. Okay, let's accept it. There we go, and I've moved everything. I'm just gonna match the current definition. So box, sphere, and torus. So you have your extension in here. I'm not sure about other engines, so that's why by default this was set up for Redshift, but I think V-Ray has proxies. So if you're on V-Ray, you could just use the format that's associated with V-Ray. If you don't have a frame range in here, so if you don't have $F4, if it's just a static object, just uncheck this time dependent, and now your time goes away. So if your object is static, you could work with it now. And there's zero padding. So right now by default it's set to $F4, and most of us are always working with $F4, but that's an option for you. This variant section is for checking the path. So this is for variant 0, box, and the frame number. This is just the first point associated with this. So the frame might not be perfect, especially if you're time shifting it, but it's a pretty helpful thing. You don't need to open your geometry spreadsheet and then find instance file, which is the attribute we're using for Redshift. Hide everything, hide everything, show instance file, make it bigger, find them in here. It's a little bit too much work. I'm pretty lazy, so I like to just check them from here. And you could preview instance file, which, as I talked about, if you're not a Redshift user, you're not going to be able to use this one. You get an error. Obviously, you also won't be really writing stuff to proxies if you're not a Redshift user, but maybe there are options. I just don't know it. I've provided the option for you if you need it. As I mentioned, the extension can be changed, so you don't have to work with Redshift proxies. And this is what we're seeing right now. Obviously, we're just seeing the bounds. If you don't want to use this one, or if I end up removing it, you can just put down Redshift instance file, and it's the same thing. As you can see, it's literally doing the same thing in here. I don't even really know if it's against copyright or something, so someone please correct me if I'm not allowed to use a Redshift node inside my HDA. Anyways, yeah, let's talk about the time shift. So this is the time shift interface, but we only need to really be worried with this section. By default, if you don't have a time shift attribute, and the name can be whatever you want, what matters is what you type in here. If you don't have this time shift attribute, you're going to be working with the current frame. I'm going to preview my instance file so you can see it a little bit easier, and you could also switch to mesh if you actually see what's happening, but it's going to be pretty slow. Bounding box is much better. So as I mentioned, if you don't have anything in here, like essentially if the tool doesn't recognize a name that's associated with this parameter in your input, the second input, then it's just going to use the normal frame. But if you set up attribute float adjust in here and set up, I'm just going to call this my time, because I want to show you guys that the name doesn't matter, but by default it's looking for time shift. So we'll put my time in here, and again, it doesn't matter, it's not doing anything. But if you push this option, you and also we do need to set up something because this is empty now. just let's say noise, and I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, like this. This maybe a bit. Push it like this. This is good. And now when I play it, as you can see, some parts start, and then we just start to see the full thing at the end. So the stuff with the time shift of 0 start first, and then anything above that, as you can see. And you can also offset it. By the way, as I mentioned before, shout out to Rich Nosworthy, because this is his workflow. I just implemented it into my stuff. This is a brilliant way of doing it. I'm very happy with how he set this up, and it was really helpful. You could delay it in the negative way, so everything just starts moving around, but then they kind of go just stop moving at the end. If you're working with things like this, you might have to set up I don't know, like 240 frames, and then just use maybe 120 of it, because you kind of need to cover everything, because you are moving these frames around. But that's yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm just gonna paste it at like maybe say 60, kind of halfway through, and uncheck this because you won't be able to render it if it's checked. Go to Proxy section. I've already set up a very simple camera and a very simple light. It's nothing too fancy. Just run render view, and this is what we're seeing. And as you can notice, it's actually pretty fast to just emerge, because we're working with Redshift proxies. So it's very compatible with Redshift. And just moving on, as you can see, literally it's updating as we're scrolling. And I have a 2080 RTX, so it's not even anything too powerful, but as you can see, just very fast render time. In fact, I rendered the whole teaser and set up the whole teaser in just 2 weeks. And yeah, I rendered like 1 minute of pretty complex geometry, and everything is, most of the stuff are proxies except a couple of the items in the teaser. So yeah, this is excellent. I've pretty much switched my whole workflow into just using Redshift proxies, especially if I'm working like with variants or copying stuff. All right, perfect. So that's it, guys. This is the tutorial part 2. If you've missed part 1, don't really worry about it, because I think we pretty much covered everything in here. Maybe a couple of stuff like the orientation. I didn't really go in depth there, or just the scattering methods. And this whole thing also works with like external points, so you don't even have to generate the points in here. Uncheck the generate points, vary your own points, do whatever crazy thing you want to do to them, and just write them as proxies and render them. Perfect. Thanks for watching this tutorial, guys. Let me know what you think about the tool. I'm very eager to see what you guys can make with it, especially right now that I talked about the proxies. I think you're ready to just start working with it. We will have one more tutorial about copy variance, which I'm gonna just cover one of the actual projects. I'm not still sure which one I'm gonna use. So far, someone suggested the first one, or I think it was the mushrooms. I actually don't really remember. Sorry about that. I have to look at the comment, but I don't know. I might just pick one myself, because there are a couple of them that I think are pretty helpful and will cover everything in just one video. But yeah, let's just see how it goes. Cheers, guys. Take care.